think you're ready.
I think we're good.
All right.
Hey, don't move.
All right. What are my boundaries? So
No, you're fine. You're good.
Framing, good.
Yeah.
Check. Sound check. And action. Okay. Thank you, Lila, for the introduction. It's super exciting for me to be over here. Like Lila said, my name is Wes. I have a consulting firm, One Straw Sustainability Consulting. I wanted to start just with this image. We were talking a little bit at dinner recently. This is one of my favorite surf spots, Lani Poco over on West Maui. And I just love working in Hawaii because you can there's not many places in the world where you can see a whole watershed from mountain to sea, ridge to reef, Mount Kudamakai. And Hawaii is so special in that regard. And so it's really like there are so many places where your actions on land, it's hard to translate them into water quality issues in the ocean. But here, it's right in your face. I mean, you can see it. So I'm just going to give a brief introduction about my background, and then move right into some of the overview of the problems that we're facing on West Maui and some of the solutions. And I'm hoping that during this talk, some of the solutions that we've come up with over there will resonate with you guys, and maybe they're something that you can utilize for your watershed. Let's see if this thing's going to work. Well, I guess I can do the old-fashioned way. So I started my career in getting into this watershed work. I kind of cut my teeth in the Chesapeake Bay area. And Chesapeake Bay is, massively different than Hawaii, clearly. The watersheds there encompass, 4 states. They're huge. And but I was super lucky in that I got to work on restoring degraded landscapes into functional ecosystems. And this is just one example. This was an old sand mine that we reclaimed into a sand seepage bog habitat wetland, which is like a big deal in the East Coast, where they were trying to restore Atlantic white cedar, which is an endangered plant species, and sort of the ecosystem associated with them. So this was where I first got to see working with nature instead of against it, and working with the natural biological processes to achieve goals that impact water quality. So the water flowing into this thing is nutrient laden. There's a lot of farmland in the area, and the water coming out of it is substantially better. Other example of what I was doing in the Chesapeake area was some of the early versions of stream restoration. And hey, Doug. And this is just an example. There's a lot of stream channels on the mainland that are deeply incised like this. They've lost a lot of their functionality. They're not connected to the floodplain. No animals can thrive in them. And so we would turn things like this into regenerative stormwater systems like this, and reconnect them with the floodplain and bring back ecological services that are associated with those streams. And then, like Lila said, for the last about 5.5 years, I've been focused in this area, West Maui. This is an area I know Kim knows a lot about, and these are the 5 priority watersheds in West Maui that are associated with the Coral Reef Task Force initiative. And what was born out of that is the West Maui Ridge to Reef initiative. And most of our work was focused in Hanakauai and Waiakuli. It was kind of determined that these were the watersheds where we would get the most bang for the buck, mainly because there was largely intact reef systems offshore here. So just to orient you a little bit and give you an idea of my area that I worked in implementing these projects. Here's Hanakauai, here's Waiakuli Stream here. These dots and dashes and lines represent different projects that we put in. Some of them are future locations. Some of those future ones have now been installed. This is an old slide. But the idea of this is just to show you that we targeted our projects where we could work with landowners and ideally achieve sediment reduction targets for these streams flowing into the ocean. I feel like West Maui had quite a learning curve over there. We took took the area from, it was a lot of planning. We had a watershed plan, and well, we had a characterization and a plan, and we moved in the time that I've been there from planning to implementation. And I think along the way we've learned a lot, and anything that we can that I can share with you guys as you move in that direction too would be, I would love to do that, because there's no sense in reinventing the wheel. Some of the, I wanted to touch on this before I go into the specific solutions. How do we pick what goes into our toolkit? How do we decide what works and what doesn't? What's a good implementation project or good shovel-ready project? Practical within a Hawaiian context, and that's a big one, because there's our landscapes are very, very unique here. We've got streams that they start up at the top, and as they have more water at the top than they do at the bottom. There's not many places in the U.S. Mainland where that happens. Usually the stream gets more volume as it moves down, not less. These losing reaches were kind of a head scratcher for a lot of people. As the water disappears, it infiltrates into groundwater. So trying to work within the Hawaiian context and making sure that it's practical. So that when I say practical, it means we've tried it and it seems to be working, or we are going to try it and we think it's going to work. So the next one, affordable. We have amazing human resources in the state of Hawaii, and we wanted our projects to tap into those human resources. So working with volunteer groups, working with the different nonprofit organizations, and utilizing grant funding opportunities. Non-proprietary, this was kind of something we learned along the way. There's a lot of solutions out there that are, they make the hard sell, and it's some sort of magic black box that transforms water that goes in into better water that comes out. And that may be true. That works in optimal conditions, and in a place where where you have access to maintenance and things like that. And so just recognizing that we don't always have access to, we don't always work in optimal conditions. And sometimes we can't get the materials that need to go into these things to maintain them. Sometimes the parts are proprietary and you have to order them from the mainland. It takes 6 months to get out here. And so just keeping that in mind, we wanted to have solutions that ideally we could source the materials locally, they were simple, and they weren't tied to a particular manufacturer necessarily. And then last and probably most important is that the solutions integrate local practices, local cultural aspects, things like low-E, local agricultural practices, things like that, and have multiple beneficiaries. I think it took us a while to get to that one. Like, people in the Coral Reef Task Force and people like me are all about coral reefs, and we think coral reefs are the greatest thing in the world, but that isn't necessarily what motivates a landowner to do something like a restoration project on their land. It might be something like, I want to beautify the gulch area next to my house, or I want to reforest this particular area to protect my property from erosion, things like that. So just keeping those items in mind, and the more beneficiaries, the better. All right, so I'll jump right into it. The ones that I picked, this is by no means a comprehensive list, but I picked ones that, based on looking at the documents from Maunalua, the watershed characterization, the conservation action plan, and some of the other documents that Lila was kind enough to send to me. These were issues that were called out in that plan, and so, and then a few others that I'm pretty sure you probably have here too. So. The first one, this is, they call this mass wasting, and this is when, basically, this is what it looks like far away. This is when the ground gets so saturated with water and the vegetation is not able to hold that ground in place, and it basically just sloughs off or slumps down slope. And this is what it looks like from far away. This is what it looks like up close. This is sort of the topsoil layer here. And as rain saturates that, it just falls off, and it leaves behind this thing called a badland, which is just exposed bedrock or very, very degraded soils. And it's really, really hard to get anything to grow once this happens. So it's kind of a problem that spreads. You know, it'll start in a little place and then it'll get worse and worse and worse and worse. And before you know it, half the mountain has slid down the hillside. So that's an example from that's Poakea in Central Maui. And this one I put in for Lila. This is Rhoda in the Northern Marianas Islands. Exact same problem. You can see the mass wasting over here, up here, in the distance. That's what it looks like far away. This is it up close. So you've lost the layer of topsoil and you're left with this severely degraded landscape. And this sediment is on its way downslope. So what do we do to fix something like that? The solution, we use a plant called vetiver as a filter strip, and we plant it on contour. So where there's some agriculture folks in the room, you know the contour lines are when you draw a line across the landscape that stays on the same level, and it can twist and wind a bit. But we plant a row of vetiver, and this acts to stabilize that soil. It catches sediment that's coming down slope, and the roots of the plant hold it in place. And we use NRCS standard for vegetative filter strips, which says that you want to use it every 6 feet of vertical elevation. And this is what they're doing in Rhoda, Telekaya Watershed, which is one of the most established vetiver projects in the Pacific, as far as I know. And it was started by Wila in
2006.
2006.
Yeah.
Great.
That was my first watershed experience.
Yeah, and this is mass wasting right here, and this is the vetiver that they're putting across it to stabilize it. Before I go on, I'm going to be talking a lot about vetiver because a lot of our solutions involve vetiver grass. I just wanted to talk a bit about vetiver and why we like it so much. Vetiver grass is it has this incredible root system. So for basically for every 1 foot of vertical growth that you see above the ground, you've got 6 feet of growth underground. So these roots grow straight down, and they have an incredible holding power to the soil. So they also are really good at taking up nutrients, filtering water, and the above ground parts are really good at catching sediment and accumulating behind it. And why we like it for our restoration areas is it can grow in these really degraded soils. The watersheds in West Maui and in lots of parts of Hawaii are severely impacted by, a legacy of grazing, or in this area it was pineapple and sugarcane plantations, old agricultural roads. It's really hard to get anything established in there. So it captures sediment behind the row, builds up that sediment layer, and then that sediment can be the base for native plants, and we can start to reestablish the native vegetation that's supposed to be there. It's really hard to get those natives established initially because you're dealing with hard pans and those badland situations. It's also a living swale, so you might have heard of a swale or a check dam, which is just a physical barrier across the landscape that catches sediment coming down. This serves the same purpose, but as sediment comes down, it can't fill up. It basically just, as it fills up, the plants grow taller, and it kind of has whereas like a traditional check dam would have a finite lifespan, this will just keep growing. Also, we use this because as soon as I mention, we're planting a grass in Hawaii, people are like, that's not a good idea. That doesn't work out so well. So, from an invasive species potential, this particular cultivar, sunshine vetiver, is a hybrid, and so it produces sterile seeds, and it was developed at the I want to say Molokai Plant Materials Center over there, and they haven't been able to reproduce, to get viable seed from it in the last 30 years that it's been used in Hawaii. So it's been approved for restoration use throughout the state, and that's including in sensitive areas. Like we do some work in West Maui on the Kapunakea Preserve, which is a Nature Conservancy managed preserve. And they're very strict about any kind of plant material that's brought into that area. And we actually had to sterilize the plant material. We couldn't bring in any soil and take those necessary precautions. But in working with it, been working with it for about 1.5 years now, and it stays where you plant it. You put it in the ground and it kind of gets a little bigger from the center, but it doesn't spread, it doesn't send out runners, so it's well behaved. So another problem we were dealing with over there was degraded agricultural roads. We have hundreds and hundreds of miles of roads that just go through fallow agricultural fields up in the watershed. Some of these roads are right next to the gulch. This is Watershed Stream coming down, and so these roads are conduits for stormwater. Anytime it rains, these roads look like this, and they carry that stormwater straight into the gulch and down into the ocean. And most of them are very poorly maintained, and nobody even knows what they were originally for, or what, if they even need them anymore. So what we did was we started decommissioning old roadways, and we used the same method that we used for hill slope stabilization with vetiver, but we just planted them right across the road. So basically you're looking down slope here, down a road, and each one of these vetiver lines is planted on 6-foot intervals, and it's designed to close off the road and also capture that sediment so that we can reestablish those native plants in this area.
What do you mean decommission?
Oh, I mean just get rid of the road. So you've got an agricultural road that it might have served a purpose during active cultivation. This was an old this was pineapple field, and so actually this was pineapple and sugar. It kind of went back and forth. So these roads ran right along the gulch edge like this, and they were to access these field blocks like this. So none of this is being actively cultivated, so no one was even using this road. So
it's not like there's some governmental process by which the road has to be officially decommissioned. You're just
right. We're just doing it, and I added this because you have to include any potential road users in the conversation. And I'll say legal road users and illegal road users, because they're sort of an informal network of dirt bikers and mountain bikers and stuff. And we found that once we engaged with those folks, and not in a judgmental sort of way, but just in a hey, here's what we're doing, they were able to work around our projects. But yeah, there's no formal. I mean, this is on state land, so we work with the Department of Land and Natural Resources, Lands Division, on making sure that it was okay with them to decommission the road. They had questions about if there's a fire, can they get access with their equipment? And yes, you can still do that. So as long as we made sure to meet everybody's goals for access.
so if somebody drives over these barrier vegetations, is it resilient to
It's pretty tough.
occasional use?
Occasional, yeah. If you ran over it a couple times, it'll bounce back. If you made a habit of it, it wouldn't respond well. But yeah, initially we had dirt bikers plowing right through our vetiver, and so they it bounced back pretty well.
You have an after picture, right?
What's
You
that?
have an after picture.
I do. I have this one. I talked to Jen, and she just took a bunch of pictures, but they're not. This looks great. If anyone's ever, thank you. No, it's all good. If anyone's ever on Maui, every second Saturday of the month, we're taking volunteers up here to work on it, and it's looking a lot better than that. This is early on in the process. So yeah, this is just what I was saying earlier. We're starting to augment our plantings with native plants. And the eventual goal, I mean, we're hoping that at some point maybe we could even phase out the vetiver. Maybe the native plants will just grow big enough that the vetiver is no longer needed, and you've got a forest or a dryland habitat established. That's down the road. Our Watershed Partnership people know that probably takes a little longer than just 1 year.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to show some initial results this is less than a year, but we put these posts in up slope from the vetiver traps, and they initially there was about 2 feet, or there was exactly 2 feet of posts sticking out, and then we were measuring the accumulation over time. You can see this one's almost buried. This has got 6 inches left, so underneath that post, there's 18 inches worth of sediment accumulation. And I mean, that's pretty impressive for just a plant holding it like that. This is our, these are the actual installations, and you can see the range is all over the place in terms of, this is sediment accumulation in centimeters, and these are each one of these is a different site, and then the red line is the control. So, you know, there's a lot of factors that go into how much sediment you're going to capture based on catchment area, you know, the contributing drainage, what the landscape above it is like, but generally you can see it's definitely working. To your point earlier, what if you need to use the road more? What if the road has to stay open? A lot of the roads in Maui and throughout the state are built with these things, see these little hooks coming out? This is looking down slope right here, so you're on a steep road going downhill. These things are called kickouts, and they're combined with a sort of a bump in the road so that water coming down the road is channeled off the road into the gulch. This is Hanakawai Stream right here. The problem with this practice is it doesn't just take water off the road, it takes sediment and lots of it right off the road. So we planted vetiver right in the kickout. This is a kickout right here. You can see the gulch down here, and this is the main road kind of runs past it, and the water flows through it. And the cool thing we found was that the water goes through, but the sediment stays put. And you can get an idea. Just you can see these right here. There's like a piece of jute mat that like we laid down, and you can see how it's almost completely buried here and close to getting buried there. This was just after one rain event, so and it's pretty early because the vetiver is still small. So the trick with this is that you have to have the maintenance capacity to scoop that sediment out. If you've got a lot of sediment moving off the roads, you have to work with the landowner and or the land managers and make sure that the maintenance is done. So another problem, that's enough of vetiver, but this is a problem that Michael and I recently documented in Pohakea, which is in central Maui. This is called head cut, and head cutting is, we're kind of, I guess, started up in the landscape and now kind of moving down into the stream area. And this occurs when a stream channel is constricted by something. And in this case, it was constricted by a culvert going under a road that was too small. And so water backed up behind that culvert, and it starts this scouring action. And it just creates this vortex that starts eroding the stream channel. And it creates this dramatic, head wall like this. It's like a sheer cliff. And this is the one that we documented in Pohakea. And you can see that fence going across there. That fence used to be inland, and then as the head cut got worse and worse, what happens is they actually migrate upstream. So this head wall here moves upstream. And so it moved right up under this fence, and you can see that these things that were buried are now just hanging out in midair as the head cut moved on upstream. So this is a source of a lot of sediment. And it's quite common when you constrict the flow of a stream to go into a storm drain or a culvert or go under a road or something like that. So the solution to this one is generally it's a big solution. It has to be a geoengineered solution where you actually take that sheer drop off, that sheer cliff here, and you sculpt this down. You lower the grade of this, make it into a more gentle slope. And then when you do that, you have to stabilize it with boulders. So you have to use riprap or placement of boulders to keep that new stream channel shape that you've created. The alternative to sculpting the head wall back is to fill up the stream channel itself with some sort of filtration media, usually gravel or sand, and then achieve the same result that way. But these are pretty complex projects, and they're very site specific, so this isn't something that you just throw one in here, but I wanted to include it because it's an important problem. And then of course you would stabilize the whole site with plants. So another issue, and Michael and I walked around Wailupe Stream a little bit today, and saw a little bit of this problem. This issue of legacy sediment. So legacy sediment is sediment that was pushed into a stream at some point, in the history of the watershed. What causes massive amounts of sediment to move into a stream gulch can be anything from like in this case, it was the leveling of these fields to make them level for planting pineapple. They just bulldozed that stuff right off the edge, and it went down into the gulch. Other things that take sediment down there can be deforestation, cattle grazing, any kind of major alteration within the landscape can cause lots of sediment to move into the gulch. And we call it legacy sediment because it could have happened 100 years ago, but there's so much of it down there that it's going to take a long time before it gets washed out. And so what it looks like is something like this. There's Tova Callender, West Maui Ridge to Reef Coordinator. She's standing next to a deposit, a legacy sediment fill terrace, and that's about 5 feet thick there. This is all material that was pushed into the stream from above. And so it's a difficult problem to deal with because you've got miles of stream that just have this legacy sediment right on the banks. And what happens is, with a little bit of rain, the water kind of flows past it and doesn't grab any of that sediment on its way downstream. But when you get heavy stream events, or if this stream starts really cranking, at some point it's going to reach this threshold where the velocity and the volume of water is such that it's going to start grabbing that sediment out of the stream bank and taking it down to the ocean with us. So we're trying to figure out exactly where that threshold is, and there are a few ways to address this issue. One of them being the way you do that is by doing as many things on the landscape that you can to retain water. So be it reforestation, a forest holds a whole lot more water than, say, pavement, or a grassy, a degraded agricultural landscape. You can do it through a number of, in the urban area, you can do it through low impact design and development, rain gardens, anything that keeps water on the landscape and prevents it from going into the stream in the first place. The good thing is most of these solutions that we're talking about, they do this anyway. They're designed to slow, filter, and sink water into the ground instead of having it run into the nearest stream. So the other solution that's a little more complicated, but has a lot of bang for its buck is full-on stream restoration. And the way this works is similar to the head cut solution, but when you have tons of legacy sediment on the stream banks, you basically fill the stream channel with some sort of filtration media like sand or gravel, cinders, things like that, and you use that to bring the level of the stream up and reconnect it with the floodplain. A healthy, functioning stream ecosystem should be able to reconnect with its floodplain, should be able to spread out during high flows, and this provides habitat. This creates a much more functioning ecosystem. Basically, what they consist of, this is sort of a schematic, but it's basically just a series of stepped pools, and the steps are created with boulders, and they're sometimes called riffle pools. But the water moves into one, has to fill up, spill over into the next, and so on. And what that does is it slows down that stream.
So after Watershed Management Plan, before implementation,
Right.
there was, and after modeling, before implementation, there was a whole USGS process that produced 2 full reports, the second of which is still coming out.
Yeah.
Still coming out. So I just need to couch where in the process, because if you're like, oh great, tomorrow we can.
Yeah.
You can, but just recognize that there was 9 years of process, and that's just what I know, and I haven't been involved before that.
Do you think that 9 years speaks to the partnerships that are there? Is that
I'll let Wes
Okay,
answer.
just
from
curious
there.
about that.
I mean, there have been empires built in Cornwall during that time. The partnerships have shifted.
Yeah, you're right. Kim is echoing my pain. Because, Michael and I were talking about this today. Yeah, I felt like we were planning, and not doing. And the question comes, like, when do you know enough about what's harming the reefs or affecting the water quality to do something? And I would argue that we know sediment is bad for water quality. We know nutrients are bad for water quality. And we know we have some pretty good ideas about what we can do to mitigate nutrients, mitigate sediment. So why not start doing those? That's been my assertion. Did I answer your question? You
Yeah, I
said
was just curious, what might that attribute to the 9 years? Could it be the mix of partnership?
I think,
Just curious, because I'm looking at the names, that's all.
yeah,
Okay, just curious.
it's.
Is it EIS preparation? Is it actual research?
I feel like
Is it
for-
engineering? What's
For
causing
me-
the delay?
Or investment and stakeholder support.
I think it's a combination of a lot of things. I think the first one is initially we were operating in a data vacuum. There was not a lot of data at all. Kim she can vouch for this. But, I mean, streams don't have any gauges. We don't know how much water is coming down. We don't have any clue. Nobody's monitoring the stuff. We started, the data was focused on benthic surveys and coral reef health surveys, and it took a while for it to start moving upland. that was probably 3 years into the process, 4 years in, just before we even got up in, streams are important. And then I think the funders, the grant cycle being what it is, a 1-year grant, they want results in a year, and nobody really wanted to fund exploring ideas, planning things, looking for, engaging with these landowners. And that was the second thing is landowner engagement was the huge part that, I think funders had a hard time with. It's like, we'll just go do this project, but okay, we have to spend a long time cultivating those relationships with those landowners. I'm sure you guys have to do that here too, right? You can't just get access to everywhere you want to do a project. So I think that's an important element. So maybe looking at that access piece and overlaying it with the hot spots, where can we do things, and hopefully something close to the top in terms of like, they'll let us on their land and they can have a big impact.
Right.
Hopefully that works out.
So the watershed management plan did kind of open the door for some of this funding
Yeah.
a little bit. So that's first.
For 319
Yeah.
funding, yeah.
Just so you guys know, I went on a 3-year dead end into re-engineering a reservoir, a retention basin, which
Yeah.
is still
On
in
a grant,
process.
yeah.
He just saw me advocating for it still at dinner.
It'll happen.
Still
It'll happen,
advocating
Kim.
for Dam Honokai number 8. It
It'll
was an
happen.
access issue, and someone had to leave the position, and the change of guard had to happen within the county organization
Yeah.
for it actually to move. But I mean, we're pretty deep into all this, and these
Yeah.
solutions that finally Wes is the first person to actually try to do anything on the landscape, I think.
Well, and it's and I put these sites. These are big projects. I don't want to like
Yeah.
Kim was saying. I don't want to say this is an easy thing we can do. This is
That one's
probably $800,000 to $1 million. I mean, you're talking a serious investment. But I put them in here because I think they're important to recognize. If we all just do little rain gardens all over the place, I love rain gardens. I think they're great, but
Yeah.
you want to have an impact. So that's why I included these solutions.
There are people in our group interested in doing a scaled project such as
That'd be
this,
great.
and there has been a lot of relationships developed in this area over the last how many years, so we wouldn't be
Yeah.
starting from scratch.
Yeah, exactly. I think you got you're not starting from scratch, definitely.
Hi,
So
Jen.
that's great.
Um,
Yeah, sorry. I want
Just
to.
because we're getting.
Yeah, let me buzz through. I'm almost done. This is just wanted to touch on.
Because we started late.
Yeah.
So just wondering.
Just wanted to
10
touch
minutes?
on the whole idea of co-beneficiaries. This project, we could just dig a big hole and make this a big sediment retention basin and put a fence around it and keep everybody out. But we wanted to create a community asset, and so we had some folks do some renderings and make them. Let's turn this into a park. A retention basin doesn't have to be an ugly thing with a fence around it. It can be a multi-use thing. You can have beneficiaries, other beneficiaries. So.
Where's this at?
Oh, this is this site here. It doesn't exist. That's a rendering too.
Okay.
I wish it did. That's the same site.
Fully number 8.
Wow.
One
Yeah.
episode, that's what it is.
That is basically this part. This is a 3-acre site,
Oh, okay, okay.
and it's land that it's located right here.
Oh, Oh,
and it'll never be developed because you can't build anything
Is it a
there because it's not a wetland, but it's in like the flow path of it. You build a
Right.
house there, it's
Flood
gonna
zone,
wash
yeah,
into
it's a
the
flood
ocean.
zone.
Yeah, it's a flood zone. So and it's also really close to tourism amenities, and there's a trail already along the beach here. And we were thinking, oh, let's just extend it up into the mountains. So yeah, multiple beneficiaries to the projects. That's the point that I'm trying to
can
get.
you go back to the slide before we're just reading stuff?
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
they were
Yeah, I'm
reading it.
zipping
Okay,
along here.
thank you.
Sorry.
Cool.
Yeah. It just had, we had the idea was it'll have walkways. We'll have native Hawaiian plants. We'll have an area for traditional practitioners to do their things, and that ideally it would be kind of a site for restoration efforts in West Maui. I hope. Fingers crossed. So I mean that's pretty much my presentation. I did just want to touch. I was told to focus more on the sediment reduction, the stream restoration elements. That's what you guys are interested in. But I did want to touch just briefly on urban hardscapes because I know I'm on Oahu. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention urban hardscapes. I mean this is from your plan. You've got incredible amounts of impervious surface, and so that's an important factor here, dealing with the runoff from impervious surface. And the solution that we're doing on Maui and that we're doing on the mainland and that's being proposed everywhere else is low impact design and development. This is just a slew of different things.
It's required in Honolulu.
It's required in Honolulu. You guys are already ahead of the game. City and County of Honolulu is doing this much better job than we are on Maui.
But it only impacts new projects.
Right.
So the problem is that's just a thin little
Right.
bit of what the whole problem is. So
Right.
we need to have programs that offer incentives and
To retrofit.
requirements to go
Yeah.
back to all these neighborhoods and put that kind of design in.
Yeah, and I put it in here because you can retrofit these systems. There's lots of ways to do it. It's also fairly easy to get funding for low impact design projects. In my experience, they fit that grant cycle. 1 year, they're easy. You build a rain garden, you put a bioswale or a pervious surface in, and it can galvanize the community around a project. And so,
It potentially could be the same sort of effect that green energy has had where it proved that, saved you money.
sure.
And
Yeah.
if you're retaining stormwater in rain catchment,
Mhm.
you can use it for irrigation. There's other
Yeah,
ways
rain
that you can
barrels
save-
and cisterns and
save your water bill.
yeah, for sure. One other quick one I just wanted to mention. This is called a floating treatment wetland. I think this has a lot of potential in the urban area here. All it is it's a floating island. This is sitting in a storm drain. It's got vetiver and native plants like taro and put callow in that particular one because it was in a visible spot. But I mention this because this can also be a really good project that can tie in nicely with any kind of Mauka restoration because these floating wetlands can grow vetiver that you can then use in restoration projects. So you've got sort of a Mauka-Makai connection doing something down in the urban area that you can use up top. Ties it together nicely.
How does, I'm sorry, I'm
Yeah.
asking questions.
No worries.
How does that work in terms of things like mosquitoes? I mean, it's a temporary wetland that's watered by storms, or I'm not.
Well, so you have to use it in retention basins that have water in them all the time. So it couldn't be like a basin that goes dry, but any retention basin that is constantly has water in it, you can deploy one of these. And there are all kinds of designs out there, and you can use really simple designs that are homemade, or you can get really fancy with them. I've even seen them in the concrete line channels that have so many of them here. They're starting to do floating wetland, like artificial riparian areas right along the walls. They're basically bolted onto the cement and they run the whole length of the canal, and it's just a big floating wetland there. They're great because you don't need a lot of extra land. You're not constructing a wetland. You're just using the existing footprint, and they do a great job of the roots that hang down provide habitat for denitrifying bacteria, and they improve water quality while at the same time providing you with plant stock that you can use upland. And then the only other, I just wanted to mention this because we learned this a little late in the game in West Maui, and Kim probably will agree with this one. The groundwater picture is really important too. You know, we talk a lot about runoff, surface runoff, but there's substantial groundwater moving underground that is basically contaminated from, you know, injection wells, leaky cesspools, septic tanks, even stormwater that goes into a dry well. It gets down in here into the aquifer, and then this fresh water moves laterally and comes up on the reef or in the nearshore area as little freshwater springs. And so the picture in West Maui, this is an important piece that we realized kind of late that we need to think about. So one of the solutions we just deployed is this thing called a permeable reactive barrier, which is just all it is a way to, you've got that groundwater moving down towards the ocean, and you intersect it with this bioreactor. And all it is, it's basically a big water filter, but all it really is slide backwards. It's just a trench that's filled with wood chips and activated charcoal, just like a Brita, you know, a Brita.
Is it biochar?
It's biochar, yeah. So the biochar provides the habitat for the denitrifying bacteria, and the wood chips provide the carbon that's needed. So it's just a trench filled with wood chips and charcoal. Nothing really fancy. And it's great because it disappears in the landscape. You can put grass right over it, it's gone. And what's happening here is this stormwater moving down. It disappears underground here. Our reactive barrier is right there by that rock. You can't see it because it's underground, but the idea is that it's cleaning that groundwater as it moves through it.
Where are you getting the biochar from? Do you have a big island?
We've got a guy on Maui that does it, Ricky Apana.
So he's taking it right there on
He is, yeah. He's been stockpiling for years. He's got a biochar operation. Biochar is just charcoal. It's just activated charcoal, and it's important because it has a very high surface area, so the bacteria can live on there.
It's good for filtering out sediment and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean more so the nutrient picture when you're talking about in this application, but yeah, it does it filters just about everything. It's like a Brita filter is made of charcoal is like the analogy I use. So I'll just wrap things up real quick. I just wanted to say that not any one of these things will solve the water quality issues in the bay, but if you do enough of them, you'll start to see real results. And I think as long as we have realistic expectations about the results and we have a long-term mindset, we can start putting these around. And this is just a treatment train approach is concept in restoration that says you sprinkle these things throughout the landscape, and the collective impact of all of them working together is actually greater than the sum of their parts. So if you do them in isolation, it's great, but if you do them together, it amplifies the benefits. So that's it. I'll leave it there, and thank you guys again so much for having me.